sun was just beginning to rise over the quiet airfield when a loud noise broke the morning calm. A private jet, shining silver and gold under the soft light, came down fast, smoke trailing from one of its engines. The landing was rough. Dust and heat filled the air. When the jet stopped, a group of workers rushed toward it, confused and afraid. Everyone knew who the plane belonged to. Mr. Roland Gray, one of the richest men in the country. He was a billionaire known for his power, speed, and short temper. People said he could buy anything, fix anything, except his own patience. And now his private jet, his pride and joy, was dead silent. The smell of burnt oil floated through the air as the crew opened the engine covers. Inside, the damage looked worse than anyone expected. The machine that once sang through the skies now sat there, lifeless and broken. Mr. Gray stepped out of the jet, wearing his dark suit and golden watch that gleamed even under the dusty light. His face showed anger, but under that a hint of fear. He had an urgent meeting that could not wait. Millions of dollars depended on him being on time. "Fix it," he ordered, his voice sharp like a blade. Engineers hurried in. A team from the nearest airport arrived within an hour. They checked the engine, tested circuits, and replaced parts, but nothing worked. The machine refused to start. As the hours passed, the air grew hot and heavy. The workers whispered to each other, afraid to speak near the billionaire. Every minute made him angrier. He kicked the dirt and shouted, "You call yourselves experts?" His assistant tried to calm him, but nothing worked. News spread quickly that the richest man's plane had broken down in a small town. Curious locals began gathering outside the airfield's fence. Children pointed, men shook their heads, and women whispered stories about how cursed rich people's luck could be. Among the crowd was a thin, barefoot girl sitting under a broken streetlight. Her clothes were torn, her hair messy, and her skin darkened from dust and sun. She had been living near the airfield for months, sleeping inside an abandoned car and surviving on food thrown away by workers. Her name was Amara. Most people ignored her or told her to go away, but she didn't mind. She liked watching planes. They made her remember her mother's voice, telling her that one day she would fly higher than the sky itself. When Amara saw the jet land, she felt something strange in her chest. She could tell by the sound, the rhythm of the engine, the way it struggled before stopping, that it wasn't just a small fault. It was mechanical failure. She didn't have fancy tools or machines, but she understood engines like she understood breathing. It was something deep, something that came from her heart. While others stared at the billionaire, Amara's eyes stayed on the broken jet. She watched the engineers open it up, noticed which cables they touched, which parts they replaced. Her sharp eyes caught something they didn't, a small misalignment near the compressor valve. She muttered softly to herself, "They're fixing the wrong thing." The wind picked up, blowing dust across the airfield. The billionaire walked back and forth, his shoes kicking the dirt. His voice echoed, "I'll pay double or triple. Just get it done." But even money couldn't help this time. The best minds around him were out of ideas. The silence that followed was heavy. Everyone avoided his gaze. From the fence, Amara stood up slowly. Her hands trembled. She wanted to help, but fear held her back. What would a man like him say to a homeless girl like her? Would he laugh? Would he chase her away? She looked at her reflection in a puddle, her tired eyes, her dirty face, and whispered, "He'll never believe me." But then, her mother's voice seemed to echo in her memory. "Never doubt the light inside you, even when the world goes dark." She took a deep breath and walked toward the gate. The guards frowned at her, blocking the way, but something about her eyes made them hesitate. "What do you want, girl?" one of them asked. I can fix it," she said softly. The men laughed, thinking she was crazy. But when the billionaire turned to look, her eyes didn't drop. She looked straight at him, not as a beggar, not as a fan, but as someone who knew exactly what she was talking about. For a moment, everything stopped. The crowd went quiet. Even the wind seemed to hold its breath. The billionaire stared at her, confused. The engineers behind him exchanged glances, whispering things like, "She's just a street kid and she doesn't know what she's saying." But Amara didn't step back. She simply repeated, a little louder this time, "If you permit, I can fix it." The sentence hung in the air like magic. The words were simple, but the way she said them, calm, confident, and without fear, made everyone turn. For the first time that day, the billionaire didn't yell. He didn't mock her. He just stood there, eyes narrowing as if trying to read her soul. Behind her, the townspeople whispered. Some laughed, others gasped. But Amara didn't hear them. Her heart pounded, her palms sweaty, but her gaze stayed strong. She knew this was her only chance, not just to fix a machine, but to fix her life. And in that silent moment between disbelief and hope, a spark lit inside the billionaire's mind. Something told him that this girl might just be the answer no one expected. That was the moment everything began to change. The air was thick with tension after hours of failure. The sun was high now, heat shimmering off the jet's silver body like waves. The billionaire stood with his jacket off, tie loosened, his patience gone. Around him, engineers argued in low voices, blaming each other. Nothing worked. Every screw turned, every wire checked, and in still silence from the engine. Then out of nowhere came a small voice. Calm, steady, almost too soft for anyone to notice at first. "If you permit, I can fix it." Heads turned. The voice came from behind the guards, from the same barefoot girl who had been standing quietly near the fence all morning. Her clothes were still dusty, her face tired, but her eyes shone like fire. For a second, everyone froze. Then laughter broke out. "What did she say?" One of the engineers mocked. "You fix this?" Another scoffed, waving at the billion-dollar jet. The billionaire turned his head slowly, his sharp eyes studying the girl. He had seen many things in life, arrogance, greed, brilliance, but never a homeless girl offering to fix a private jet. "You think you can do better than my team?" he asked, his tone cold, amused. Amara didn't flinch. She took a few steps closer, her bare feet silent against the ground. "I don't think," she said softly. "I know." A hush fell. The engineers looked insulted, some crossed their arms. "She's wasting our time," one said. "Sir, don't let this fool embarrass you," another added. But the billionaire didn't move them away yet. There was something strange about her. Something in her eyes that didn't belong to the streets. It wasn't pride. It was quiet certainty, like someone who had seen this kind of machine 1,000 times before. Amara pointed at the side of the engine. "You keep adjusting the ignition module," she said calmly, "but the compressor intake is cracked from inside. You'll never restart it like that." The lead engineer frowned, angry. "You don't even know what you're talking about," he barked. "Go back to wherever you came from." But the billionaire didn't laugh. He walked toward her, his shoes crunching on the dirt. "You seem very sure," he said slowly. "How do you know that?" Amara looked up at the giant machine, her voice soft but steady. "Because it's breathing wrong," she replied. "An engine breathes just like we do. When it's tired or hurt, it sounds different. You can hear it if you listen." Her words silenced even the laughter. The billionaire stared at her, something shifting in his expression. "You can fix it, you say?" "Yes," she answered simply. "If you permit." The air around them grew still again. The guards looked at each other, unsure what to do. The engineers whispered nervously, afraid he might actually let her try. It was absurd, impossible even, yet something in the billionaire's gut told him this wasn't madness. Finally, after a long pause, he sighed and said, "You have 15 minutes." The words hit the crowd like thunder. Everyone started talking at once. "This is crazy! He's risking the engine. She'll break it worse." But the girl didn't react. She simply nodded once, her eyes focused on the machine. The billionaire's assistant rushed up. "Sir, she's a nobody. What if she damages the engine beyond repair?" But Mr. Gray raised his hand. "She gets 15 minutes, he repeated. "And I'll know in the first 5 if she's lying." Amara walked forward slowly, her heart pounding in her chest. She felt every eye on her, mocking, doubting, waiting for her to fail. But as she touched the cold metal of the engine, all that noise faded away. It was just her and the machine now, like old friends meeting again after years apart. Her hands moved gently over the surface, feeling every vibration. The engineers watched in disbelief. "What is she doing?" one whispered. "She's listening," another murmured, and she was. With her eyes closed, she tilted her head and whispered, "You're tired, aren't you? Let's get you breathing again." The billionaire's eyes narrowed. Something in him, and something human, something long buried, wanted her to succeed. He didn't understand why, but for the first time that day he wasn't angry. He was curious. Then Amara turned to him and said, "I'll need a wrench and one of your men to hold the panel." The billionaire glanced at his team. None moved, so he stepped forward himself, surprising everyone. "Tell me where to hold it," he said quietly. The girl blinked, surprised, then smiled faintly. Right there, sir. Hold it steady. As her hands began to work, dust rising around her, people fell silent again. No one laughed anymore. There was something different about the way she moved. Sure, precise, and calm. She wasn't guessing. She was knowing. Minutes passed and a soft clicking sound came from the engine. Her movements quickened. The billionaire watched her closely, his heart beating faster with each second. No one realized it yet. But in that moment, everything had already changed. Not just for the machine, but for the girl and for the man who had stopped believing in miracles. And somewhere deep inside that silent engine, a small spark waited, like a heart about to beat again. The crowd around the jet had grown completely silent now. Dust hung in the air, sunlight flickering off the metal body like fire. Everyone watched as the barefoot girl, Amara, crouched beside the billionaire's prized jet, her small frame nearly swallowed by the giant machine. The engineers stood at a distance, arms crossed, waiting for her to fail. The billionaire, Mr. Gray, stood nearby with his arms folded, trying to appear calm. But deep inside, a war was raging. What am I doing? He thought. Letting a homeless girl touch a multi-million-dollar engine? His business partners would call him insane. His security chief had already whispered, "Sir, this could go wrong fast." But something about the girl's calmness, the way she handled the tools like they belonged to her, it made him hesitate to stop her. Amara didn't look at anyone. Her hands moved quickly, eyes scanning every bolt, every curve of the machine. She didn't have fancy gloves or safety gear, only instinct. She whispered to herself while working, her lips forming silent words as if speaking to the jet like it was alive. After a few minutes, one of the engineers couldn't hold back. "She's just pretending," he muttered. "Engines don't work that way." His friend chuckled quietly, but Mr. Gray shot them both a sharp glare that froze their laughter. "Give her space," the billionaire ordered, his voice low but firm. "Let her finish." Amara looked up briefly, meeting his eyes. "Thank you," she said softly and went back to work. Then she did something that made everyone blink. She tapped the side of the engine twice and pressed her ear against the metal, listening. She stayed like that for a long moment, eyes closed. The world around her faded away, the whispers, the heat, the doubt, all gone. Finally, she whispered, "You're breathing wrong. Your pulse is off." Mr. Gray raised an eyebrow. "Pulse?" he asked quietly. Amara smiled faintly. "Engines have a rhythm, sir. Just like hearts. You can feel when they're sick." The engineers shook their heads, some rolling their eyes. But before anyone could speak, she pointed to a small joint deep inside the intake area, a piece so minor that even experienced mechanics might ignore it. "That part," she said. "The internal valve under that bolt said it's cracked. The air isn't flowing right. That's why the engine keeps choking when you start it." The lead engineer stepped forward, frowning. "Impossible. We already checked from the outside." Amar interrupted gently. "Not from within." The way she said it stopped him cold. Her tone wasn't proud or arrogant. It was just sure. The billionaire looked at his team. "Open it," he said. They hesitated. "Sir, if we open that panel now, it might take hours to reseal." "Open it," he repeated, more firmly this time. The tools clinked and clattered. The engineers worked nervously as Amara watched, eyes sharp and unblinking. When they finally opened the narrow valve, everyone leaned in and gasped. A thin crack, nearly invisible, ran across the part exactly where she had said. The lead engineer's jaw dropped. How did you?" Amara simply smiled. "I listened." Mr. Gray's expression softened, his disbelief slowly melting into awe. "You saw that without any scanner, without even touching the core?" Amara shrugged lightly. "Machines talk, sir. Most people just don't know how to listen." The billionaire turned to his engineers. "Replace the part," he ordered. But Amara shook her head. "There's no replacement here. I'll fix it." Everyone stared at her as she grabbed a small metal strip from the toolbox and began to file it down with careful, steady hands. It wasn't textbook repair work. It was something far older, more instinctive, more human. She worked like an artist restoring a painting no one else could see. Sweat rolled down her face, but her hands never trembled. She adjusted the damaged valve, sealed the crack with a thin layer of composite, and realigned the intake manually, something no one dared to do by hand. The onlookers watched in complete silence. Finally, she stepped back and said, Try it now. The billionaire nodded slowly. The lead engineer hesitated, his hand hovering over the ignition switch. Sir, are you sure? Do it, Mr. Gray said. The man pressed the button. For a moment, nothing happened. Then a low rumble echoed through the air. The engine sputtered, coughed, and suddenly came alive. The sound grew stronger, smoother, more powerful, like a heart returning to life after a long sleep. The crowd gasped. The engineers froze. Mr. Gray just stared, speechless. The impossible had just happened before his eyes. The jet's engine was running perfectly. Amara wiped her hands on her shirt, her voice calm. It's stable now. The airflow's balanced again. You won't have that problem anymore. The billionaire stepped forward, looking at her like he was seeing her for the first time. Who are you? He asked quietly. She smiled faintly. Someone who still believes broken things can be fixed, even if no one else does. The wind picked up, lifting strands of her hair as the roar of the engine filled the airfield once more. Around them, people whispered in disbelief, recording videos capturing the moment that a homeless girl had done what no one else could. But for Amara, it wasn't about fame or money. It was about proving that she still mattered, that even from the shadows her light could still shine. And as Mr. Gray looked at her, something changed inside him. For the first time in years, he wasn't thinking about money or reputation. He was thinking about miracles. The roar of the jet engine thundered across the dusty airfield, shaking the ground beneath everyone's feet. The once dead machine was alive again, its blades spinning fast and smooth, the sound deep and steady like the heartbeat of a giant. The crowd gasped and shielded their faces from the wind. Even the sun seemed brighter now, glinting off the silver body of the jet that everyone had thought was beyond saving. For a few seconds, no one moved. Then all at once people started shouting, cheering, clapping, but not for the billionaire. All eyes turned to the thin, barefoot girl standing quietly beside the engine, her face calm, her hands covered in grease. She didn't smile, didn't boast, didn't raise her arms. She just stared at the running machine as if listening to a song only she could hear. Mr. Gray, the billionaire, stood frozen. He couldn't speak. His $1 million team of engineers had failed him. Yet this homeless girl with no uniform, no badge, no fancy tools, had brought his pride back to life in less than an hour. His assistant whispered, "Sir, she actually did it." But Mr. Gray didn't respond. His eyes were locked on Amara. The lead engineer, the one who had mocked her earlier, stepped closer, staring at the engine in disbelief. "Impossible," he murmured. "No one could have done that without diagnostic equipment. How did she even know where to start?" Amara wiped her hands on her torn clothes and looked up at him. "Machines talk," she said softly. "You just have to stop talking long enough to listen." The simplicity of her words hit everyone like a quiet thunderclap. For the first time, no one dared to laugh at her. The billionaire finally walked closer, his expression softer now, full of something unfamiliar. Respect. He stood beside her, both of them facing the powerful engine that still roared in the wind. "You fixed it," he said, almost to himself. "You really fixed it?" Amara nodded lightly. "It just needed care," she said. "It wasn't broken, just ignored." Those words pierced deeper than she realized. For years, Mr. Gray had lived surrounded by noise, deals, money, fake smiles. But this girl's simple sentence made him feel something he hadn't felt in a long time. Humility. Behind them, people were recording on their phones. Videos were already spreading online. Homeless girl fixes billionaire's jet. But Amara didn't notice. For her, this wasn't about fame. It was about proving to herself that she still had worth, that her mother's voice, the one that told her she was meant for something greater, had been right all along. The billionaire turned toward her. "What's your name?" he asked. She hesitated for a moment before replying. "Amara. Where did you learn to do that, Amara?" he asked, her eyes dropped to the ground. "I used to study aerospace mechanics," she said quietly. "At Eastbridge College. I was halfway through my degree when my mom died. After that, I couldn't keep up. Bills, rent, everything went wrong. I ended up here." Mr. Gray's face softened. For a man who had built empires, it was strange to realize that the girl who had just saved his jet had once built dreams that life had crushed before they could fly. He looked back at the roaring engine, then at her again. And since then, I fix broken things, she said simply. Cars, bikes, machines no one cares about. They keep me alive. Something stirred deep inside him, guilt, admiration, maybe both. He had spent his life chasing speed, innovation, luxury. Yet this girl, who had nothing, had shown him what real brilliance looked like. The sound of the engine began to fade as the engineers powered it down. The sudden silence felt almost sacred. Dust floated through the air like slow snow. Amara stepped back, her expression unreadable. It's fixed, she said, as if the whole thing had been ordinary. But to everyone watching, it was anything but. The billionaire spoke again, his voice quiet but strong. Amara, you've done something no one else could. You deserve more than this, she shook her head. I didn't do it for reward, sir. I just couldn't stand watching something beautiful die when I knew how to save it. Those words hit him harder than applause ever could. He looked around, the crowd staring, the engineers speechless, and suddenly felt ashamed of all the times he had looked down on people he thought were less. He reached into his pocket and handed his assistant a card. Call Eastbridge College, he said firmly. I want her reinstated. Full scholarship. I'll cover everything. Amara blinked, confused. Sir, Mr. Gray raised a hand gently. You've already proven yourself. Now it's time the world sees what you can really do. For a long moment, she just stared at him, unsure whether to believe his words. Then for the first time since her mother's death, she smiled. It wasn't wide or loud, just soft and real, like sunrise after a long night. The crowd began to cheer again, louder this time, but Amara barely heard it. The only sound she focused on was the faint hum of the jet's engine, smooth, alive and strong. She whispered to herself, You're flying again. And though she didn't know it yet, that day was the beginning of her own flight, one that would take her far beyond the skies she once only dreamed of. The next morning, the story was everywhere. Headlines flashed across news channels and social media. Homeless girl fixes billionaire's jet. Engineers left speechless. Photos of Amara standing barefoot beside the roaring jet filled every screen. The video of her calm voice saying, If you permit, I can fix it, had gone viral overnight. Millions watched it on repeat, some in disbelief, others with tears in their eyes. But while the world was busy talking, Amara was sitting alone on the same bench near the airfield, staring at her dirty hands. She didn't feel like a hero. The grease was still under her nails, her stomach still empty. For her, nothing had changed yet, except one thing. The billionaire had said he'd come back. As the sun rose, she thought about her mother again. She remembered the nights when her mom used to whisper, You were born to build, not to beg. Amara smiled faintly, brushing away a tear. I did it, Mama, she whispered to the wind. I really fixed it. A few hours later, a black car stopped near the airfield gate. The guard straightened immediately. Out stepped Mr. Gray. Crisp suit, dark sunglasses, but a softer look in his eyes this time. When he saw her sitting quietly by the gate, he walked over without saying a word. You didn't think I'd forget, did you? He asked gently. Amara stood, unsure what to say. Sir, I didn't expect. He cut her off with a small smile. You saved something priceless yesterday. Now it's my turn. He handed her a folder, heavy paper, golden seal, official letters inside. Amara opened it slowly, her hands trembling. It was a scholarship. Full tuition, housing, and a job offer in training at his company's engineering division once she finished her degree. I called your old college, Mr. Gray said. They remember you. They said you were one of the most promising students they ever had, until you vanished. Amara's eyes filled with tears she couldn't hold back anymore. She tried to speak, but the words wouldn't come. Mr. Gray continued softly. Yesterday, you reminded me of something I forgot. That true genius doesn't need titles or money. It just needs a chance. She closed the folder and looked up at him. Sir, why me? There are so many people smarter, richer, better than... He interrupted again, his tone warm. Because you fixed more than my jet, Amara. You fixed my pride. The words hit her harder than applause ever could. For years, she had lived in silence, invisible to the world. Now the man everyone admired was thanking her. Come with me, he said, gesturing toward the car. Let's get you started. As they drove through the city, Amara looked out the window at the streets she had once walked barefoot. For the first time, she wasn't looking for scraps or shelter. She was looking forward. When they reached the company headquarters, she couldn't believe her eyes. The building was made of glass and steel, gleaming under the afternoon sun. Employees stared as Mr. Gray walked in beside a thin young woman with dusty shoes and a quiet smile. He led her to the engineering floor, a room full of machines, models, and prototypes of new aircraft. "This is where you belong," he said. Amara walked slowly through the room, touching the smooth metal of a half-built engine. She could feel it, the same heartbeat she had heard in that broken jet. Only this time it wasn't lifeless. It was full of potential. Mr. Gray watched her closely. "Do you know why I trusted you that day?" he asked. Amara shook her head. "Because you looked at that engine the same way I used to look at the world, with love. Somewhere along the way I lost that. You reminded me." She smiled faintly, her eyes bright. "Machines can't survive without care," she said. "And neither can people." For the first time in a long time, Mr. Gray laughed. A real, unguarded laugh. "You're right. And I think I've just found the best engineer in the world." Later that night, as Amara stood by her new desk overlooking the glowing city, she felt something she hadn't felt in years. Peace. She looked down at her hands, still marked with grease, and whispered to herself, "These hands fixed more than a jet. They fixed my life." She didn't know that outside the building, cameras were already waiting. People were calling her the miracle mechanic. Reporters were begging for interviews. But she didn't care about any of that. All she cared about was learning, building, and honoring her mother's dream. And as the city lights reflected in her eyes, she knew this was just the beginning of a story no one would ever forget. The days that followed were unlike anything Amara had ever known. Her name was suddenly everywhere, newspapers, talk shows, social media feeds. People called her the miracle girl, the street mechanic who saved a billionaire, and the genius nobody noticed. But fame didn't make her proud. It made her quiet. Every headline reminded her of the long, cold nights she'd slept under bridges, the hunger that had kept her awake, and the dreams she'd almost given up on. While the world shouted her name, Amara preferred silence. She moved into a small apartment near the university, her scholarship papers still neatly folded inside her bag, as if she was afraid it might all vanish if she blinked. She started classes again, sitting in the front row, always listening more than talking. Her professors were amazed. Her classmates were curious. They whispered things like, "That's the girl who fixed Gray's jet," but Amara didn't mind. She wasn't there to impress anyone. She was there to learn. Meanwhile, Mr. Gray was keeping a close eye on her progress. He had promised to give her a future, but deep down, he felt he owed her something more. He often found himself thinking about her words. It wasn't broken, just ignored. They haunted him, not in a bad way, but like a truth he had forgotten for too long. One evening, he invited her to his office, a vast room of glass overlooking the city skyline. As she stepped inside, Amara looked almost out of place among the polished floors and expensive art. Yet she stood tall. "Calm as always, Amara," he said, motioning for her to sit. "I've been watching your work at the company. You've already improved one of our prototype engines. The team says you have a way of understanding things differently." Amara smiled lightly. "Machines talk, sir. I just listen." Mr. Gray nodded slowly. "You said that before. But I've been thinking, maybe that's what people need too. Someone who listens." He paused, looking out the window at the lights below. "You changed the way I see things. I've been rich for so long I forgot what purpose feels like. You gave that back to me." Amara shifted uncomfortably. "I didn't mean to change you, sir. I just wanted to fix something that was broken." He turned toward her, his eyes thoughtful. "You fixed more than that jet. You fixed a part of me I didn't know was broken." There was silence for a moment. Then he slid a small card across the desk, a formal offer letter with the company seal. "This is your official position, Junior Aeromechanic Engineer. But it's not just a title. It's the start of your real career. You'll work directly with my top engineers on our new project, a new kind of aircraft engine that could change flight forever." Amara blinked, stunned. "Me? Work with your engineers? You've already proven you're better than most of them," he said with a faint smile. "Now it's time the world sees it." She took the card with trembling hands. For a moment, she couldn't speak. Tears filled her eyes, but she quickly blinked them away. "Thank you, sir," she whispered. Mr. Gray leaned back, studying her. "Tell me, Amara, if you could build anything at all, what would it be?" She looked down, thinking. Then her voice came soft but clear. I'd build a plane that never leaves anyone behind. One that can fly even through storms like life. It shouldn't stop just because it's hard. Mr. Gray smiled. A genuine, almost fatherly smile. Then maybe that's exactly what we'll build. Weeks passed and Amara threw herself into her work. She stayed late in the workshop, her hands black with oil, her notebooks full of sketches and formulas. The engineers who had once doubted her now came to her for advice. She earned their respect not through words but through quiet brilliance. Sometimes when Mr. Gray visited the workshop, he would find her standing by the test engine, lost in thought. You remind me of me when I was young, he once said. Only better. Amara smiled shyly. I just want to build something that lasts. You already have, he replied. Your story. But Amara wasn't interested in fame. She was interested in meaning. And though she didn't know it yet, her name was becoming a symbol of something far bigger. Hope. Her story was being told in classrooms and boardrooms, in villages and cities. People said, if a homeless girl can fix a billionaire's jet, maybe I can fix my life too. And as she sat alone one night, watching the city lights flicker below her window, Amara realized something beautiful. She had become living proof that broken things, when given a chance, could fly again. She whispered softly, the same words that had changed her fate. If you permit, I can fix it. Only this time she wasn't talking to an engine. She was talking to the world. Months turned into a year, and the world didn't forget Amara. Instead, her story kept growing, like ripples spreading from a single drop in still water. Everywhere she went, people recognized her. Children pointed at her on the street and whispered, that's the girl who fixed the billionaire's jet. But Amara never let fame touch her pride. She still rode the same old bus, still bought secondhand books, and still spent her evenings in the workshop. Her hands stained with oil, her heart full of quiet fire. At Mr. Gray's company, she had become more than an engineer. She was a symbol, a reminder that brilliance could come from anywhere. The same men who once doubted her now respected her, seeking her opinion before testing any new engine model. Even the senior engineers began calling her the listener, because of how she could detect a problem just by hearing the hum of a machine. One winter afternoon, Mr. Gray called her into his office again. His hair was grayer now, but his eyes were softer. He looked almost proud, not like a boss, but like a father. Amara, he said, I've decided to announce something big next month. We're launching a new aircraft line, and I want you to lead the engineering team. Amara froze, thinking she had heard wrong. Lead the team? She repeated. He nodded. Yes, you've earned it. You've done in 1 year what most people can't do in 10. But sir, she said hesitantly, I'm still learning. He smiled. And that's exactly why you're ready. The best minds never stop learning. Tears filled her eyes as she tried to hold them back. She remembered all the nights she'd slept hungry, all the times she'd been told she wasn't good enough. And now here she was, being trusted with something that could change the future of aviation. When she left his office that day, the city lights seemed brighter. The air felt different, lighter, freer. She knew her life had changed, but she also knew she wanted to use that change for something bigger than herself. So when the press conference came, the hall was packed with reporters, photographers, and cameras. Mr. Gray stood at the podium, speaking proudly about innovation, progress, and the new face of engineering. Then he turned toward her. I want you all to meet someone extraordinary, he said, gesturing for Amara to join him on stage. A year ago, she was a name no one knew, a girl living on the streets. Today, she's the lead engineer behind the most advanced jet engine our company has ever built. She reminded me and the world that greatness doesn't wear a suit. Sometimes it walks barefoot. The audience burst into applause. The noise echoed like thunder. But Amara just smiled humbly and stepped up to the microphone. Cameras flashed in her face, but her eyes searched the crowd. And for a moment she imagined her mother sitting there, smiling proudly from somewhere beyond this world. She took a slow breath and said softly, I wasn't born with money or power, but I was born with a gift, and I almost lost it because no one gave me a chance. Mr. Gray did. He believed when no one else would. But what really matters is that we start believing in people before the world tells us not to. The hall went silent. Every word she spoke carried weight. not just of truth, but of lived pain and strength. There are thousands of kids out there who could build, heal, and create, she continued, if only someone gave them a voice. I was lucky. Now it's my turn to give others that chance. The crowd stood up, clapping, not for the jet, but for her. After the event, reporters followed her everywhere, asking what she planned next. She smiled and said only one thing: I want to build something that helps people rise, just like I did. A month later, she founded a small non-profit foundation called Permit to Dream. It offered scholarships, free training, and mentorship to young girls in underprivileged communities who loved machines and science. The name came from the same words that had once changed her life. If you permit. Mr. Gray supported her every step of the way. He donated, advised, and told everyone proudly, Amara isn't just an engineer. She's proof that humanity still has hope. And though she still spent long nights at the workshop, Amara's dreams were no longer her own. She was building something far greater, not just engines that flew through clouds, but bridges that lifted others toward the sky. Sometimes late at night, she'd look out her office window and whisper, I fixed a jet once, but maybe what I really fixed was the way people see each other. And in that moment, surrounded by light, she smiled, because she knew her journey had only just begun.